This is the Comedy Slab, and it's a big birthday, isn't it, Shane? I'm Adrian, he's Shane. I'm in the southeast of England. He's in the Midlands. What's the big birthday? Tell the nice ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of the listening audience.
We have reached the big, the whopping, the huge 6-0.
Ginormous. This is CS, as it's known in the trade, CS060. Do you notice I put a 0 in front in the vain hope we might reach 100?
Well, or as my wife put it the other day when I was editing episode 59, she went, "Blimey, is that how many you've done?"
Does that mean she doesn't think it feels like as many?
Do you know, I never really ask her that deeply. I don't question anything.
You skated over it. No,
all I'm saying is...
That's why your marriage works, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Don't question. Don't ask too many questions. In her world, I think that's praise, but I'm not sure.
I don't know. It sounds sort of... I don't know. It could go either way, couldn't it, really?
Yeah.
Like this show.
Yes.
Anyway, so
like
we are...
marriage.
Yes, indeed. We are slabbing a postcode this week. Furthermore, half a postcode, or at least that's the title of the show. It's W1A. It is... I have to stop myself saying 1AA.
Half a postcode is better than no postcode.
Are you under the affluence of alcohol?
I'm just high on life.
Oh, very nice, very nice. A natural high.
Yeah.
I'm unnaturally high, but then that's the power of G&T. And it's only 6 a.m. No, whatever time. It's all, as they say in Canada, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It was a country and western song, wasn't it? That it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm not doing it justice, obviously.
It's an excuse for no. Well, you don't do anything much justice, no. But anyway, we will get to the slabbing of the show. Well, should I explain the formula of the show for the brand new listeners this time round?
Do you know, that'd be lovely. Yeah, why not? I mean,
because I get
60,
told off, don't I? Yeah. Okay, so if you've just joined us, you've missed 59 shows, but the good news is they're all up there in archive land. No, it's all right. I wasn't having a go. You make me feel like I should feel guilty for saying that.
I thought he was going to go down the route of you've missed 59 shows, but it's all right. We're so thick-skinned, we'll probably do another 59 anyway, so you're not going to escape us one way or the other.
Well, I hope we do. That's why there's a 0 in front of the 6-0 in the vein. Do you know that Hitler deliberately had the numbers of... No, hang on. I got the wrong guy. Churchill. I knew it was one of them.
Which side were we on? It was like the Mitchell and Webb thing, isn't it?
Well, are we the good guys?
In the trench,
yeah.
It's Hans, are we the baddies?
I laugh so much.
Skull and crossbones on our cap.
And my headphones fell off. Right, yes. I was trying to remember which side it was. My dad was on the good side. The trouble is, famous cousin Ron, who I never, as you know, I never pushed that link with my Hollywood acting relative, my dad's first cousin, Ronald Lacey.
The late great Ronald Lacey, yeah.
The late great Ronald Lacey, indeed, as opposed to the living, not so great Adrian Lacey. You've got to have a system. Anyway, he was, to my knowledge, the only Nazi in the family, but one has to add swiftly, he was only pretending. As far as we know.
And he was in a good cause, wasn't he? I was going to say, yeah. Ladies of the...
Ladies of the Rost Ark. Are you sure you haven't been drinking?
I'm going to get the teeth out.
Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, yes. My dad told me... I couldn't remember whether it was to do with Cousin Ron as a Nazi or my dad telling me... my dad, I should point out, was... he was sort of more answerable to Churchill than to Hitler, fortunately. Yeah. So... I picked the right side. I would have thought. I should have sounded more sure about that, shouldn't I? Really?
I was going to say you sounded quite regretful and remorseful there that you weren't on the right side. So unfortunately, we were on the British side when war broke out.
Well, you can say, as a mate of mine said, we were in some fancy cathedral in Italy on holiday years ago, and he said, looking at a stained glass window, you had heaven and hell depicted. He said, I've got to say, hell's much more interesting. Which is why he's a screenwriter, because he writes baddies. And baddies generally are more interesting. Anyway, what I was trying to say years ago was my Dad said they deliberately had very long serial numbers, or whatever the term would be. What would it be as a soldier? Your roll call number, or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
But it had extra digits, and of course it was not a very sophisticated way of trying to say to Hitler, we've got more soldiers than we actually have.
Yeah, it was serial number, wasn't it? Because you just tell them your name, rank, and serial number.
Right. Oh, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. In which case, they just added a couple of noughts. So there's no guarantee we'll get to 100, but we're not doing badly, are we?
If it is, if we don't get to 100, it won't be because there's a lack of comedy to critique. It's because there's been a lack of enthusiasm for us to do it, isn't it? Or a lack of will.
That's unthinkable. Or one of us croaks. But I thought you were going to say. But let's hope it's not that. Not anytime soon.
And then the surviving one can put the other one on the slab, literally.
Dissect the deceased one. I'm laughing, but it might be me, of course.
Yeah.
On the slab. Okay. Now, where was I going? Many hours ago, I was trying to say... Oh, yeah, I know what I was going to say. Just before getting to... I was going to explain the rules, wasn't it? Yes. The slab is the slab of comedy whereon we put a different TV, radio, podcast, comedy show each week. We dissect it and see what we make of it, and each give it a score out of 5, add it up, so we have a score out of 10. That is the formula. Very straightforward. I think they call it high concept in the trade. That's the only thing I'm associated with, which has got the prefix high. So apart from what Shane says to me when we first make contact each time. He's 170 miles away, and even that isn't quite enough, but it'll have to do.
Unfortunately, you can still hear me.
Yeah, and indeed see you. But fortunately, the listeners, you don't have to suffer what I have to suffer, which is seeing his fizzog, courtesy of the Skype app.
That is
yes.
We also play 3 clips as well, don't we? We have 3 clips of the comedy programme.
Thank you for the prompt, yes.
To give you a bit of a flavour.
Yes, a flavour. So if you haven't seen W1A, Series 3, Episode 1, or indeed any W1A, which is a comedy set at the BBC, because that is the postcode, to come back to the original point, we will fill in the gaps in your knowledge, if we may. Right, so to audio clip 1 of 3. So W1A set at, one of my major clients, which is the BBC, just to... give the disclosure at the top. So W1A 1AA is actually the postcode of where I work. It is Broadcasting House. It is in the heart of London's swinging West End, and no lesser personality than Hugh Bonneville, or I should say actor, than Hugh Bonneville leads. He plays the head of values, doesn't he? So it's a kind of send-up of bureaucracy. And the BBC is, I would say, quite unusual in being able to laugh at itself. I mean, you'll have a different view, and we'll hear from you, and we'll get your headline on what you make of W1A and this particular episode, the other side of this clip. But to set it up, we hear Hugh Bonneville chairing a meeting and effectively setting up what is the topic of this particular edition of W1A.
Thank you for making time in your diaries for this. I know how busy things are at the moment.
Yep.
Yes, they certainly are, Ian, yes.
By 9 o'clock, Ian is chairing a special meeting of the Way Ahead group in his role as someone whose job it is to steer the organisation confidently towards whatever it is that's going to happen next.
But I called this meeting because I think we're at a critical moment in the life of this group, and who knows, maybe even in the life of the corporation.
Hurrah!
This is the year in which the BBC's Royal Charter is up for renewal.
Of course, we know there are some tough choices coming our way.
Brilliant.
Yes, exactly.
Which is what the More of Less initiative is about, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The fact is, this is about identifying what we do best and finding more ways of doing less of it better.
Yes, brilliant.
The charter renewal process gives the BBC an opportunity to question everything it does and ask the question whether there's any point to any of it at all anymore.
And with all that in mind, my suggestion is that as from today, this becomes the renewal group rather than way ahead.
All right, okay.
Yes, good.
Hallelujah.
Well, no.
Renewal.
No, honestly.
It just focuses the mind, that's all.
No, I'm sorry, Ian. That is just, I feel like opening the window and shouting down Regent Street.
No, well, please don't.
It's interesting when you just listen to it and you don't watch the pictures. How choppy it sounds. It really does sound kind of, it's like a game of ping pong, isn't it, between 8 people.
Yeah.
I didn't really notice that when I watched it as much as you do when you just listen to it. I guess I don't really know, but yeah. You want me headline?
Yes, folks. This is a reinvigorated, restored feature where, in a short, pithy sentence, you give us your reaction to this show.
Look at us! Aren't we great? We're laughing at ourselves. We're really self-deprecating. It's a bit of a long one, and probably needs a bit.
And slightly sarky.
Yeah.
Now, hang on. Didn't you say the other week? Loyal listeners may have picked up on you saying. In fact, last week when I set the homework, because we take it in turns, of course.
Yeah.
It was my week last week to set the homework for the following week, which is where we are now. Gosh, I'm sounding like Hugh Bonneville, aren't I?
I'm going to have to get a pencil out in a minute if you carry on.
Yes, precisely. But didn't you say, I've just been watching that?
Yeah. I mean, I've also read Peter Mandelson's autobiography, but it
doesn't mean you like him.
Well, I don't. I mean, I liked him even less. Same with Tony Blair. I read Tony Blair's book, and I didn't like him when I went in, and I liked him even less when I came out. But
I've got to ask you, sorry, slight aside, which we're very good at, cutting in, talking of politicians and books, are you going to buy David Cameron's autobiog?
Yeah, I probably will. I'm not a fan, but I kind of, I find, I tell you who's the one was Kenneth Clarke was the one for me that really cemented my relationship with politicians, because
he's a bit different, isn't he?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, Tony Blair's book was all about his guilt about the Iraq War. I mean, it's all about his Catholic guilt. That's what it was for the whole thing. I was going to say,
only today, sorry to cut in again, but I will let you speak anyway. Yeah. But, I mean, Cameron is doing the promotion circuit for his book, and he's done an interview for The Times. And I was reading, not the original interview, but a just short excerpt of it. And it seems, I was thinking only today that you'd said this about Blair and Iraq's guilt. And it's got to be Brexit for Cameron, by the sound of things. Or certainly the pullouts, the quote from this interview was how he's aware it's gone terribly, but he tries to shove it off to Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. Hey, we're here to talk about comedy rather than tragedy, but I couldn't resist a parallel there.
They're hardly comparable, though, are they? I mean, he's not. You know, he didn't send British soldiers off to their death in the name of Brexit. You know what I mean? It's like it might be comparable in his own psyche, but I couldn't in the real world. I don't think it is. But what I was saying is that I do like to watch things just so that I've watched them and understood them, and not necessarily come away thinking that it was the best thing since sliced bread. So yeah, I've watched the whole series. I binge watched the whole thing.
But you're saying you hadn't seen it before, or that you come back to it?
No,
W1A.
I'd watched it in bits. I think I'd watched bits and pieces, and you know, some of one series and whatever. But I kind of went back to the start and watched the whole thing. I mean, it's only a minor part of the overall thing, but I do kind of just get the impression that it is a very sanitised version of laughing at the BBC. I mean, I think personally that Ronnie Corbett talking about his producer. Or Morecambe and Wise talking about, you know, how cheap the BBC are, was more cutting edge than this ever got to, in terms of actually looking at themselves. Because there's a part of me, having worked for the public service broadcaster, there's a part of me that I for a long time I couldn't watch Top Gear because I was so annoyed at the money that they were wasting, throwing minis out of aeroplanes and, you know, throwing caravans onto it. Because I thought, that's public money you're spending there, and that's gratuitously too much money for that particular project, and there's always part of me that kind of thinks that you have a duty of care to get the most bang for your buck when you work for a public service broadcaster.
Sure.
And Gary Lineker, again, we mention him every week now, more or less, but it's a good example. You don't need to spend 1.75 million quid on Match of the Day. You could cut that bill like that. And that's why when they say they can't afford to give over 75s a free TV licence to that, it doesn't wash with me, because I think, no, you are wasting money, quite obviously, in certain. And so this never really kind of tackles, it's all very funny, isn't it, that you've got all these managers who haven't really got a job. But you know as well as I do that when you're there, we've only ever worked there in the capacity of actually doing something. And when you've got these managers who are not contributing, in fact, they are a barrier 9 times out of 10, it is really frustrating and quite tiresome that you've got that. So I don't know how much of that I can't divorce from my own head. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
So I can see that, and I accept that I kind of that's the baggage that I take to it. As a piece of comedy, I have to say, that David Tennant is the voiceover I love, but doesn't it betray the writer? Don't you think you can instantly tell who the writer is and what he's written before?
No, I wouldn't have been able to, but I have to say, I like the style of what he's writing for David Tennant. I remember Series 1, Episode 1. In fact, rolling back even further, rewinding, I remember hearing about W1A, and I thought that would be terribly navel-gazing, and it'll only be for us media types. I knew I would be in with a chance of liking it, but I just thought it won't reach beyond the front row, to use a kind of phrase. And yet, my wife, now we're separated, and we're saying, you say my strange wife, I try and clarify my estranged wife, just to
don't put that on me, you scumbag.
Keep it away from the lawyers. But she loved it she fell in love with the Will character. Yeah, cool. The trainee, sort of intern, as we must call them now.
Hugh Skinner's a fab actor, isn't he? I've loved everything he's been in.
Well, that character never did it for me, and I don't know him anything else, so I can't really comment. He's convincing in that role.
He actually plays Prince William in The Royals. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Have you seen The Royals? He's
no, I know of it.
Not The Royals, The Winds, as it's called, I think.
The Winds, yeah.
He was in Fleabag. He was in the first series of Fleabag, actually, in one of the episodes.
Golly gosh. Well, I must have seen him, because I think I've seen all of that.
But the writer, John Morton,
director.
He wrote People Like Us.
Ah, yes. Now, Chris Langham, who's kind of, shall we say, fallen from grace. But, I loved People Like Us.
But don't you think that when you listen to David Tennant, it sounds like the voiceover on People Like Us, the words, the delivery?
Now you mention it, yes. And again, the fact that there's a narrator at all. I mean, there's a critique on our beloved IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. I'm trying to see if I can, as it were, get it up. Stop it! Oh, no.
I'm just writing my own jokes here at this end.
Yeah, I bet you are. We must get to our next clip soon to cover our modesty. But actually, I might. Have I got time to mention this now? There's a sort of paragraph in a review, which is, to be fair, they've given it 7 out of 10, I think.
Right.
The person says, this is a review on imdb.com. I watched the first few episodes of the first season and giggled appropriately. That's kind of damning with faint praise, I think. Goodness knows the BBC makes a good target for this kind of satire. You sure this isn't you reviewing it?
Nah, it's far too polite.
Yeah, I was going to say 7 out of 10 is too generous from you as well. And it's a good proxy for many similar corporate settings. That is the point I was going to make, that my wife doesn't work in the BBC. She's not in the media. She works in local government. But if you've ever worked in any bureaucracy anywhere, I got the impression from her, you would find something in this to enjoy.
BBC is local government, isn't it?
It's
the Department of Broadcasting.
I've always said it's a civil service with microphones and cameras. And it is. I mean, I've even heard a former Director General call it, a contradiction in terms. He said, where's that effect? It's a civil service structure with cutting-edge technology. It's a massive contradiction. But
he also said it's a lovely place to work and what a smashing pension.
Yeah, well, I couldn't possibly comment as it's one of my clients. As you know, you rotter.
Ex-Director General said, I couldn't believe the money they were bringing up in the lift in a wheelbarrow.
I didn't think the lifts were actually that strong, but who knows? Tell you what, I've once been sidestepping that remark because I couldn't possibly comment. Did I tell you about the time I was in a lift, just before we get to our next clip?
Yeah.
I was in a lift, at one of the 4 lifts on one side of the BBC New Broadcasting House, which appears in this show. And I looked to my left and there's a man with a hawk.
I think you
didn't expect that. Well, it was nearly that bizarre.
Like
I did hear the other day. Did you hear about, actually that was on the news quiz, a woman who had a small horse she took on a plane for emotional support. You've heard of that story?
I saw, her emotional horse.
I thought of you because I thought, oh, right, because Shane's going to think, that's nice and very tolerant, and yes, we should tolerate. Everyone should have an emotional supporting horse.
Emotional horse. I thought it was an old pony, to be honest with you, but there you go. I don't know.
Shall we move to our next clip clop? See what I did there?
Yeah.
Right, what's this one called? Sorry, just prompted myself. The story moves on to the BBC's. I fast forwarded past a sequence. Actually, just before I play it, I wonder what Shane makes of this sequence. It's a PR company. They've gone to a new PR company called Fun, or the Fun Corporation. Would you want to talk about it after the clip?
Yeah, can do, because that was one of the points that I wanted to.
I think you're going to have strong feelings about that. That's just a hunch I've got, knowing you as I do, after working with you for 60 episodes. Anyway, this is Siobhan, isn't it, who's from the Fun organisation, PR people, coming back to the BBC with a suggestion of what sounds suspiciously like a BBC version of YouTube.
Okay, so here's the thing with this. Here's what it is. No one watches television anymore.
Well,
No.
I mean, like, no one. Okay? Get over it.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
I think that's perhaps
It's over.
a bit of an overstatement.
It's not an overstatement. It's an uber statement, okay?
What?
Brilliant.
Meanwhile, BBC head of brand Siobhan Sharp has arrived to present the BBC with a hello present to end all hello presents from PR giant Fun Media. The idea of a completely new online platform, BBC Me.
I mean, like, television. What is that? I don't even know what that is.
Yes, they're very good.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Against the background of a changing media environment, her mission is nothing less than to introduce the Renewal Group to the idea of the future so that everybody knows how it works and where it's coming from and will be able both to recognise it and know what to do with it when it arrives.
I mean, I can see where you're going with this, Siobhan.
You so cannot.
But just to inject a note of reality for a moment, I mean, nearly 9 million people are watching Happy Valley at the moment.
Okay.
I mean, okay, it's not Morecambe and Wise anymore.
Okay, so I don't even know what that is, okay?
No, but still, it's a lot of people, that's all.
Okay, so I'm talking about the future here, right?
Well-
Okay, and you're talking about the past.
I'm talking about last Wednesday.
Okay, that's exactly my point. Okay, that's over, right?
Well, no,
So
but...
I've got 3 words for you guys. U, G, and C.
I mean, I've got to mention Jessica Hines, who I love as well. First came into contact with her when she did Spaced with Simon Pegg. I don't know if you ever saw that. And she played a fabulous character in The Royal Family with Ricky Tomlinson and the rest of the gang there, where she was Cheryl, who was a friend of the family, I think she was. Right. But she was always on a diet, and she always came around and was eating stuff. It was going, how's your diet going, Cheryl? And then take the mickey out of her. A couple of things about it. Did you find that wears a bit thin? The yes, super. Oh, smashing. Oh, hello, missus. And it all felt a bit. I started to feel like it was all being nicked. That the voiceover and that kind of input was being nicked from people like us. The 2 guys, are they called Tom and Jerry? I think the two guys that are at the
Ben
meeting.
and Jerry.
Ben and Jerry, that's it.
Do you know what the surnames are as well?
No.
Because I know you're a Shakespearean scholar. You'll get this joke because it's a chin-stroking joke. It's Guildenstern and Rosencrantz.
Right.
Yes.
But I felt they were nicked from Reggie Perrin. Because there were two characters in Reggie Perrin that used to go smashing,
super nice.
Yeah,
it was.
I thought you nicked that off David Nobbs kind of thing. But did you get that sense? You kind of think, it's all wearing a bit thin now. It's the same people piping up all the while. Is the same.
Well, guess what? In the review that I'm convinced more than ever that you wrote on IMDb, if I was to continue where I left off, the next sentence. After a good proxy for many similar corporate settings is, but after a while, fatigue set in. And they say, compared with 2012, which was it that same writer as well? Certainly a lot of the same team, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Production team. In their view, consistently laugh out loud funny. Too many characters in W1A share similar lines and, yes, no cool affectations. Can I just finish this point? Because actually I started out on this journey before. But what really fails, in the opinion of whoever is writing this, is the mockumentary angle. It was tenuous, they say, in 2012, which was a send-up of the Olympics of that year, London Olympics, but just about kept within the lines as an unlikely but feasible documentary. W1A, in their view, would have been better pitched as a straightforward satirical comedy, nearly finished, rather than having a narration constantly reminding the viewer that we're supposed to regard this as a reality programme. I mean, I don't know if you want to comment on that before we move on.
They didn't give me a problem at all. The thing that you picked up on before the clip was I found the this we're going to say I love her, the Jessica Hines character.
Yeah.
I found it all a bit far-fetched, I think, is the best phrase that we use up here in the Midlands. I don't know whether a lot of this is a London thing, and you always think I'm having a go at you when I say this, but I don't, because
I do, because I think
you know, in the same way that New York is a different entity from the rest of America, I think London is a different entity from the rest of the country, and I do think that things play out differently. Like, you know, the bike thing where they all arrive at work in the morning, they've all got the fold-up bikes, and I think as the series goes on, there's like bike envy, and they're trying, you know, and whatever. I think that is something that just doesn't, you know, because we all live further away from where we work as you get outside of London, and so those kind of things don't, you know, it's like if you set something on the tube is a very London thing. And so I don't know whether, you know, the perfect curve, whether there are people that vapid and narcissistic and
well, but I think, well, to slightly defend London, if I may, I think you would find that in a PR company anywhere, wherever you've got people who can, what's that phrase, blue sky thinking. They can, you know, those boards people scribble on whiteboards and flip charts and all of that. There's a culture there where you can get away with murder because it's just about ideas. I mean, this was satirised over 40 years ago by Woody Allen in Annie Hall. If you remember, he goes to a party. Is it Tony Lacey's party? I love Tony Lacey because of his surname, played by Paul Simon, of course. But, you know, Woody Allen moves from New York to LA, and in American terms, you're going from gritty reality, like you might think of Glasgow to London, you read New York to LA, where, as Woody Allen says, the Woody Allen character, is it Aubrey Singer or whichever one he's in, whichever role he's in, I don't want to move to a place where the only cultural advantage is to be able to turn left on a red light. And that's the only advantage you can see in moving to LA, because they're just unhinged. That's how he sees LA culture, and a lot of people do too. California, you know, skateboarding around with their plastic bottoms and other parts which they weren't born with.
Let me ask you this thing, because I mean, you've worked in London quite a lot, and you know, and the surrounding
Guilty
areas.
as charged. Yes.
And you've worked in that kind of environment as well. And I just wonder, have you ever come across, I'm not saying as you work for them, have you ever come across companies that, you know, had silent discos and you know, that kind of...
I mean, that's comedy stretching it, isn't it? No, I've never been there. Although I've seen a van where someone's advertised it and, you know, someone drives around with all the kit. We should explain, I think most of our audience will know what it is, at least in theory, if not practice. it's all done by radio links, isn't it? You wear headphones. It's the wrong term, really, because it's not silent at all. If you put the headphones on, it's very loud, or can be. But there aren't any speakers thumping away.
I did like actually the one point. Did you see where they had a track? They had an idea, and so he honked the horn and he played to start the silent disco, and it was with the rhythm stick, wasn't it?
Yeah, I imagined you enjoying that, knowing as I do.
I had to go and listen to the album afterwards.
But the thing is, well, yes. I mean, I heard it the other day on the radio, and it was as gorgeous as ever. But and I've seen it live as well. I managed to catch Ian Dury, as I so often don't, towards the end of his career, when he knew he was dying. But the man went out on a high. 2 years he knew he was dying from liver cancer.
Yeah.
And being Ian Dury and being a rough old Essex geezer, no nonsense, he just got out on the road and played the gigs of his life, almost literally.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. But I digress. If you were, say, a sanitation engineer in London, I think you wouldn't be, using flip charts and highlighter pens and talking vaguely about blue sky thinking. There is a gritty London. There is a London that's in touch with the same world that I think you would recognise. That's why I think it's slightly unfair, because if you go to a PR company in New York or Edinburgh or Hempstead, heaven help us, you'd find much the same thing. And in an ideas culture, it's harder to measure, isn't it? If you've got a sanitation engineer, the sanitation either works or it doesn't. But if you come up with an idea, it's very hard to know if it's going to be a hit or not. Isn't that true?
I just wonder whether, I've never come across these characters in real life or anything near them in my real life, so I just wonder whether they exist or whether it's like the BBC meetings as well. This the news guy's always swearing, isn't he? In fact, he swore in that clip, and you kind of think you'd never. The BBC meetings are nothing. Not ones that I attended anyway were nothing like that, because you would never.
But news people do swear more. I mean, I've moved in different subcultures within the BBC and outside the BBC as well. I think we've got to cut it some slack. It's fiction, and it's going for laughs, so it's exaggeration. But it's exaggeration of something that, for me, has actually got some basis in reality. I don't expect W1A. I mean, it's mockumentary, so it's at least claiming to start with some kind of reality. I think that's the implication, I think, of being a mockumentary, because half the word, of course, comes from documentary. But I don't expect it to be faithful to the nth degree. Otherwise, I wouldn't be laughing, because real life is not that funny.
Yeah, I mean, all of that aside, they're all just like kind of footnotes. But I think overall, I found it very, very tiring and very tiresome. It took a lot of concentration towards the end, I thought, to keep with it and to keep interested in it. There were some standout performances, and this was the first time that I ever caught up with Rufus Jones, who I just think, I've never seen the guy play remotely the same character in two separate things. He's just amazing every time, and I think I'll be watching him for like 10 minutes, and I think, that's Rufus Jones there in this. He's done so many small parts in so many things. And he's
a very camp ideas person here, isn't he?
In this he is, yeah. But he has got such a range. He's a fantastic comedy actor, I think. I think he's, again, really underrated, really understated as well. But yeah, it's Hugh Bonneville. He was in the Paddington things, wasn't he? I think he did the, he kind of always plays this. So again.
Voiceover are we talking the
in the film he did the film he was the dad in the film, but he kind of has one person he turns up and plays Hugh Bonneville in it, doesn't he? That's his, whether he's in Downton or with whatever he's in, that's what he does. But that's good enough. You can get away with that if you're Hugh Bonneville, presumably. But I thought he was quite a good anchor in all of it, and that was, I suppose, what he was supposed to be. But good cast, but there were just parts of it that I just felt were a bit overdone. Lovely, super. Oh yes, and then people chipping in all the while. It was like you just wanted to shut up, just everybody. Shut up, will you? Just the other thing is, but what are your thoughts on theme tunes? Because why does he use the theme tune for Animal Magic?
Do you know what? I was going to scribble that down as a note, but you've prompted me. Younger listeners, as ever, you will say to them in your best Alan Partridge tones, "Oh no, you're taking a glass of purple." Or I will say it, "Google it."
Google it.
But it is the theme tune, as people of a certain age, such as myself and Shane, know for Animal Magic, which was it was kind of David Attenborough, but with Johnny Morris revoicing. It's for kids, really, and when we were kids about 100 years ago.
It was a lovely program, wasn't it?
It was very gentle.
Yeah, like two elephants, and he says, "Oh, hello, have you got any buns?" "Yes, I have. I've got some." It was like really gentle, wasn't it? But anyway,
it was lovely.
But my point is, it was like it was a classic, wasn't it? So as soon as that music comes on, you think, "Oh, Animal Magic." You think of all the starving artists there are out there who would love to contribute a new piece of music. Or not, don't have it. I mean, don't have it at all.
Shall I tell you what my take on it is? And you might think I'm overthinking, and I may well be because I haven't got any proof of this. But it makes me think of the phrase "all human life is here." Isn't that a quote from an American humorist or satirist or something? And he or she, I think he is. We'll get on to audio clip number 3 any second now. Honest, but he or she is referring to a zoo. So You've only got to look at a zoo to see all human life. I didn't get that at first. And years ago, I used to think it was talking about a hospital. But, I mean, that would be equally true, really. All human life is in a hospital. And some human death as well, tragically. But, hey. Right. Shall we move on to the third and final clip before we get into ever more hot waters? Right. Let me remind myself what I've called this clip, which will be a prompt. So these clips obviously come in chronological order from the show, so we're pretty close to the end of the show. Just to set this up, I do need to explain that there is a presenter. Start one step back. He's a footballer who also happens to be a cross-dresser. He's appeared in a Channel 4 documentary as such. Ryan, someone possibly half based on sort of an amalgam of different footballers. Mosaic. I don't know. You're the football fan.
I thought he was quite funny. This was actually. I did like this little bit. Although I was surprised how.
I'm pleased.
I was surprised how poor an actor Gary Lineker was, and how good an actor Alan Shearer was.
Right.
It really shocked me, that did actually. I thought, because you think, well, Lineker does it all the while, but Shearer I thought was the more believable of the two of them in the thing. But it was really funny when he turned up and he actually did it. And yeah, I quite like this section.
So just before we get to it, the backstory is that this footballer Ryan has failed a screen test for Match of the Day, which leads our sweary newsman to say, what was it? Something like, hang on, I've written it down. Is it something like too dull for Match of the Day?
Yeah,
he asked in incredulity. Obviously, a Gary Lineker fan like you, Shane.
Yeah,
I did find that a very funny character. But
yeah, he did say that, wasn't it? He said was he too boring or something? Too dull.
Too dull. He just couldn't believe that anyone could be
for Match of the Day.
Anyway, so what they've decided to do, being the BBC, and in some people's view, of course, being desperate to be PC and loved and lovable and for lovies, they've decided to give this guy another chance, this footballer, who failed an earlier screen test, but they're giving him another chance because he's had a go at the Beeb since being on this Channel 4 documentary. So they were anticipating quite a lot of incoming, I think was the phrase, which was quite good over this, which means incoming complaints if they didn't give him another chance. But the chance they're giving him is tucked away, what was it, 3rd Division or something, on a wet Wednesday night or something from Salford?
Yeah, it was some kind of lower division playoff in one of the cups, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not risking him on, something I would understand, like the cup final. So our Hugh Bonneville character, the head of values, goes up to Salford, shins it up with a couple of the women from the team, Siobhan, Shane's girlfriend, and the lovely Lucy, played by a very talented actress. I'll get to her in just a sec after we hear it. And then we meet here in this clip the head of sport and what he makes of, I guess, screen test number 2, in effect, or the rehearsal, the tech run.
And then we spent the whole evening rehearsing.
Right. So, how's it going?
How is it going?
Yes, how's it going?
I mean, with Ryan and...
Yes, exactly, with Ryan, yes.
Well, we got through the tech somehow.
Right.
And I have to say, we weren't sure how this was going to go initially, but I think we're at a point now where we can say with some confidence that he is naturally crap.
Right.
It's just something he's got in him, I think.
Right, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, not a great night for Southampton by any means, but, Norwich came here with a clear intention. They kept the shape and they worked hard.
They had a plan and I guess they stuck to it.
Yeah, you've got to give them credit for that, Gary. In the end, they got the result, which I'm sure they've taken before the start of the game.
By 10:35, the waiting is over, and it's time for match of the day.
And Ryan, I know you were less than impressed with some of Southampton's defending.
Yeah, I was, Gary, yeah, I was.
Right.
Well, for me, they were poor, and for me, that's unacceptable.
And I think you've got some examples that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I have, yeah. Well, for me, they were poor, Gary, and for me, when you're poor at this level, you're going to end up getting beat. And yes, they got a draw, but I'm sorry, for me, that's not a win in my book.
I mean, he goes on. The best thing is he's in a frock, isn't he? He's got all these
and tights, dark tights,
all his ladies' clothes on, and he starts going. They do the playback, and he's saying, "Oh, they're playing the diamond here." He said, and then what's that? He said, "That's not even a shape." He said, "That's just a pointy line." And I've actually seen something similar to that on sports programs where they're trying to get the playback system to work and all that sort of stuff on Sky. But yeah, I just thought it was a lovely little diversion. I mean, it made it sort of finish more on a high for me, really. That little section, but yeah.
Oh, that's good. Can I just say before I forget, because I said I would mention, well, the character is Lucy Freeman, who's one of the top brass of the BBC, played by Nina Sasanya, if I'm saying that correctly. I think Nigerian father, but born and bred in Britain, as far as I know. And well, there's a lot. I think all these interruptions, which I understand, I get some of the fatigue. I think that's probably why I've left the show for ages, and I've literally not seen it for years. It felt fresh coming back to it, but you wouldn't want to binge watch 3 series of it's very catchphrasy, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that is a limitation. It's almost like the writers, talented though John Morton is, and he's also director, which I think is doubly talented. And I did like, as I said earlier, People Like Us. But he has boxed himself in. Again, you don't know how much is that the executive producer saying, oh, we like this, it's going down really well. John Plowman, for instance, or the producer Paul Schlesinger, we should say it's a BBC Studios production. I don't know the backstory, I don't know the politics, the subtext, all of that, not having worked on it. But if all you've got to play with is very frequently recurring catchphrases, I think it limits the subtext. Having said that, of course, you're hearing only the audio in the clips, and there's a lot of eye acting going on, and it made me feel at least there is some subtext, because there are sort of jealousies and envies which are implied. Did you feel with the looks? A new person joins a group, and then someone's suddenly, the dynamics changed. I'm not in charge of this anymore, I thought I was. Or I'm not as important as I want to feel I am.
I think you're right. I think it was like kind of trying to allude to character relationships. I think as an acerbic take on the BBC and all that, and trying to self-deprecation, all that, I think it failed dismally. I think it was a really watered down. I could imagine Tony Hall being delighted with it, and saying, "Oh yes, this is the kind of self-deprecation we want," that doesn't actually scratch the surface at all. I think from that point it was a complete failure. Big shout out to my favourite named actress, Ophelia Lovibond.
Oh yes, I know. I thought of you, and you'd referenced her before.
she was in Lobbyland, wasn't she? Who played Izzy, lovely Izzy, as the characters would say. Time for the numbers, I think, isn't it? We do the numbers. Do you think?
Long overdue? Some people will be thinking. Probably my turn, isn't it? This time.
You go for it, baby.
I'm going to go for 3.5. I could imagine that possibly falling over the course of a series when you start to see the formula, as the IMDb critic, or indeed the Shane critic, has alluded to. Having said that, it was lovely to come back to after a break. Were you surprised? Was that noise, your reaction, surprised that I was that generous? Or
no, I thought you'd have been more generous with it.
I nearly said 4. It did plop into my head. But immediately after I thought 4, maybe I shouldn't throttle these first ideas. Kill your darlings. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably the wrong phrase in this context. But I did think, I was immediately thinking of the fatigue that would set in over the course of a series, which might be unfair, but maybe I should give it 4. Now you've worried me. Anyway, you give your mark, and I'll see if I want to revisit mine. You won't let me do it, but
halfway house for me, 2.5. I think could try harder. I think if it was a school report, would be my critique. Not unpleasant, but lots of ways that it could have been better and less tiring, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Okay. I'm not shocked by that.
Still respectable, isn't it? 6 out of 10 for W1A.
Yeah,
not bad at all. I don't know what to do now. For next week's homework, I've picked 2. Because we were having a conversation, as we very rarely do, and I kind of let the cat out of the bag, and I said, I was going to pick a radio one, and you went, don't tell me, because I said, no, we don't normally tell each other. So I picked a radio one, and I picked a TV one as well, and I don't know which one to do now. I don't know what should we toss a coin for it?
No, I'm tempted to say radio because we've done TV this week, so
okay,
just save your coinage.
Shall we do the radio one? Well, the radio one I chose is a Radio 4 comedy with the guy's name escapes me now, because I thought we were going to go for the TV one. It's a series called, and if you caught it, called Brian Gulliver's Travels.
I vaguely am aware of the title. I don't know that I've heard it. Tell me more.
And it stars Neil Pearson, a fine comedy actor. He's been in many things. A fine straight actor as well. And it was written by Bill Dare, who a lot of people will know from...
Cartoonist? No,
you're thinking of Bill Tidy. Bill Dare was the guy who produced his Dead Ringers.
Oh, wow. Well, that's got to be some recommendation. Brother of Dan.
And it's essentially, I won't give too much away, but it's this guy who thinks that he's been on these travels to other places, and he's describing them to his daughter. It's as simple as that. It's Series 2, Episode 2, and it's all about his travels to a place called Lessington, and that's the title of the episode. Series 2, Episode 2, Lessington. That's Brian Gulliver's Travels, written by Bill Dare, starring Neil Pearson. That's your homework for next week.
Okay, that sounds like a bit of fun. I hope it turns out that way. There are occasions when it doesn't, but hey, that's what it's all about. And I should say, I said it last week, but W1A, just backtracking to what we've just been slabbing, is available on the iPlayer, certainly if you're in the UK, or there is a sort of a bolt-on subscription type iPlayer outside the UK. If you're lucky, it might be on that. But in the UK, as we speak, it's available for another 8 months, it says. So, but don't take that for granted, because I put off my tax return for 8 months, and before you know it, you get fined.
It comes around very quickly, doesn't it?
It does when you least expect it.
Don't forget, you can follow us on social media if you want to catch up with what we're up to. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, @Comedy Slab is the place to find us on both of those.
And we are at Spreaker, on Spreaker, by Spreaker, with Spreaker. However you want to get us, that's for the audio podcast. There's a semi-visual version on YouTube. It's just sort of slow-moving graphics, which is very much like me, slow-moving. And,
graphic.
I wasn't going to pursue the image too much, but and also it's on your favourite podcatchers. I mean, iTunes is sort of it gets a feed from Spreaker. It's all very clever. I don't know how it's done, but it is done. So if you're on iTunes, I imagine we could even do something on Android or RSS. I can't guarantee it though.
We don't know how it's done, but it is done, and that's all that matters to us. That it's done and done regularly.
And indeed, we're now done, or I certainly am. End of another long day. So I am going to say yes, exactly. Yes, quite. And you?
Oh, for me, I'm off to watch reruns on YouTube of Johnny Morris in Animal Magic and getting the two elephants to go, "Oh, would you like some buns? Oh, yes, please, I'd like some buns. Would you like some buns? Yes, please, I'd like some buns."
You can make a trunk call.
Does wear thin after a while, doesn't it, when you say it out loud like that?